The long-awaited PowKiddy X55 has finally landed in my hands, thanks to the team at Mechdiy. The X55 promises an ergonomic layout, a big screen, and performance that should be impressive all the way up through Dreamcast and PSP. It also comes hot on the heels of the actually pretty great PowKiddy Arcade 2023. So there's a lot to live up to here, and expectations are pretty high. Let's jump in and take a look. Hello and welcome to Retro Breeze. Here it is, the PowKiddy X55. I want to say a big thank you to the team at Mechdiy for sending me this unit in exchange for a review. As always, my opinions are my own, they're unbiased, and they have not been influenced by the company in any way, nor are they seeing this video before it goes live. So let's do a quick unboxing. The box is pretty typical PowKiddy fare, and I do like the dark blue over the old kind of yellow color for the X series. It looks very smart and a bit more serious. The box is, to be honest, very typical PowKiddy. It's very light on any extras. You just get an instruction booklet and a thin USB cable included. So here's the X55 itself, and first impressions is that it looks absolutely great. It has a very elegant blue color, and the design appears to be very well thought out and pretty attractive. Straight away, I love the look of this big D-pad, and I really hope it holds up. Oh yeah, and also this thing is way bigger than I expected it to be, but I don't see that as a fault. I think my impressions based on the pictures, I just had the wrong mental image. But yeah, it's big, but it's very, very light. In fact, it's so much lighter than something like the AYN Odin, for example. The grips on the back here make it incredibly comfortable to hold. I don't know how they did it, but I think PowKiddy has absolutely nailed what shape this device should be. The raised grips on the back edge really fit perfectly into your palms. However, right away I noticed a bit of a disappointment here. This blue plastic is the type that picks up oils from your hands, and this is immediately noticeable. In fact, I almost think that there was some hand or fingerprints present the moment I took it out of the box. I would think PowKiddy would have learned from the X18S, but apparently not. Anyway, let's take a look at this. On the front you have your standard gamepad layout. On the top you've got the shoulders and trigger buttons, along with a power button, a reset button, a USB for host, a USB for charging, HDMI output, and a headphone jack. There's nothing along the sides, and along the bottom you have your two SD cards, TF1 and TF2. One of these is for the operating system, and the other is for your ROMs. The face buttons are really, really great, with a membrane-based thunky clunk. Let me rephrase that. They're membrane-based switches with a satisfying thunk when you press them. They're actually a bit lighter than previous PowKiddy models though, as in they're a bit easier to press. But overall they feel great and they have plenty of travel. And the D-pad, the D-pad is absolutely great as well. Just look at how it pivots. I love that it's a really large size as well, a bit bigger than is typical on these handhelds. The analog sticks are just simple Nintendo Switch style sticks, but they have unrestricted rotation, and they don't stick up much higher than the buttons, so all looking great so far. However, the volume, start, and select keys are very loud, snappy, and somewhat cheap feeling clicky switches. It's so loud that I'd actually be a little bit embarrassed to press them in public, which was also a problem I had on the Arcade 2023. More on that soon, by the way. Also, this just drives me crazy. The volume plus is on the left and the volume minus is on the right. I don't know, that just drives me mad. But anyway, the shoulders and triggers are clicky too, but not too much. They feel fine, but there's not much travel to the triggers. Also, the click on them does feel a little bit hollow. Let's do a size comparison. Here's the X55 next to its little brother, the Arcade 2023. Here it is next to the Switch OLED, and next to the Odin, and you can see here that these are pretty close to being the same size, although the X55 is quite a lot thicker. And here it is next to the Steam Deck. And of course next to the N-Gage QD, because you're watching Retro Breeze. So let's go ahead and turn on the X55 and see what we're working with. By default, it looks like the brightness is actually set to a very low setting, but actually, no it's not. It's at about 78% brightness by default, and when you max out the brightness, it does not get bright at all. In fact, it is shockingly dim at max brightness. Now this looks fine at standard room lighting, but get it anywhere close to daylight and it becomes really problematic, as in, you just can't see the screen at all. Not only that, but because the screen is dim, when you rotate it off-center and look at the screen from an angle, you lose a huge amount of visibility, which on brighter screens usually isn't an issue. This is not at all what I expected from this display. It is really, really dim. Look at the difference here between the AYN Odin and the X55. I'd say the Odin gets well over twice as bright at maximum brightness. And even the RK2023 gets much, much brighter as well. And here it is playing in the daylight. As you can see, it's basically unplayable. I'm just standing next to my window, and I cannot see barely anything on this screen. Again, compare this to the Odin. Of course you should expect to lose some visibility in daylight, but the Odin is still perfectly visible. Again, look at the X55. This is just ridiculous. It has no brightness at all. The screen just vanishes in daylight. And this is just so disappointing. Because when you're in the right lighting conditions, and you're looking at the screen directly on, the colors look great, and it's very, very sharp. It just lacks any sort of vibrancy or punchiness. If you dim the lights and draw the blinds, you're probably going to have a great experience playing the X55. But in just simply natural usage throughout today, it is noticeably dimmer than anything I've tested in recent memory. Anyway, we gotta move on eventually, so let's go ahead and play some games. The X55 does well everywhere that you might expect, on all 2D based systems. Mega Drive, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, even arcade with CPS3 or MAME, everything seems to run pretty much great. Even the heavier titles like Yoshi's Island on Super Nintendo run great, although I did forget to record that, sorry. Oh yeah, and the speakers are really, really good, by the way. They punch well above their weight, and they have really rich and nice audio, even at the highest volumes. No distortion here. However, when you get to the heavier systems, things start to fall apart pretty quickly. Dreamcast performance is particularly disappointing. Crazy Taxi was incredibly spotty, even with the internal resolution turned to minimum, which looks horrible by the way. Dead or Alive was also incredibly slow. In fact, Dreamcast performance across the board is just really not very good, and it's nowhere near as good as the RK2023, which actually has the same chipset. It's really strange, it's just not as good for Dreamcast as the 2023 is. N64 performance is also way worse than I expected it to be, and once again, the RK2023 is much better. Super Smash Bros. 64 runs pretty much fine on the 2023, but absolutely chugs on the X55. I just don't get why there's such a huge disparity in performance between these two devices that share the same chipset, even when the games are running at the same resolution. When it comes to PSP, it is unfortunately pretty much the same story. It's okay, maybe good at best, but definitely not great. Disclaimer, I haven't tried PSP on my RK2023, so I can't compare it. But honestly, you can forget about running anything close to a heavy hitter like God of War. It just doesn't work. Tekken 6, however, played pretty well. I didn't really have any complaints about it here. And by the way, the sun had started to come out at this point, and it became an absolute nightmare to record this device. The brightness is just so low, it became a real frustration to try and cut out reflections and stuff like that. So I apologize for the poor quality video, it just is what it is. I've never had to deal with such a dim screen before. I actually started to get a little frustrated that I just couldn't capture much good game footage here. Anyway, Ridge Racer PSP played fairly well, but it did seem really slow to me at first. Then I found out that the PSP emulator is actually locked at 30 frames a second by default. After changing this back to 60, it ran pretty consistently at 60, but there were definitely some very noticeable and fairly often drops to 40 frames a second. And Ridge Racer PSP is not a hard-hitting game, so again, I'm just really confused about the performance here. It's just really not that great. Now this is just my very first impressions, this was the first time I had opened this device and taken it out of the box, so there's some tweaking to do, there's some further investigation for me to do. And if anything changes here, I'll be sure to let you know in the description box below, especially if I find any fixes for the performance or the dim screen. But for now, these are my first impressions, and unfortunately, they're really just not very good. I think the X55 is expertly designed. The design and the ergonomics really are next level, especially for PowKiddy. The device is a great size and it's very light for that size. The grips are perfectly shaped and the whole thing feels really nice to hold in your hands. It's very comfortable. Most of the inputs are really great. Face buttons are perfect, D-pad is really great, and the analog sticks are fine too. I'm a little disappointed by how clicky the shoulder buttons are, but it's nothing I can't live with. However, the clicky buttons on the front are just a little bit too loud and cheap sounding. I don't know why PowKiddy cheaps out on such random areas like the function buttons. Just make them quieter or use membranes. It would improve the overall experience so much. I was also incredibly impressed by the speakers, which are punchy and loud and just really nice. But unfortunately, I'm left with a whole laundry list of reservations about this device, because the screen is just too dim to realistically use in a natural way. You have to be in a darker environment. And the performance that I was expecting from this chipset just doesn't really seem to be there. And it's definitely not as good as the performance on the PowKiddy RK2023, which is the same chipset. I'm really hoping that a lot of these issues can be fixed in firmware, maybe even the brightness, and if that's the case, then the X55 has potential to be a really amazing device this year. But in the form that I got it out of the box in, it's just not there. I will be doing more videos including a full review of the X55 once I've had it for a couple of weeks and I'm able to give you my final impressions. I'm also going to be really keenly looking out for custom firmware and fixes for the dim screen and the wacky performance. So keep an eye out on my channel, definitely subscribe if you want to see that because I do think this is going to be one to watch. Again, if those can be fixed, this is going to be a big one. But for now, that wraps up my first impressions of the PowKiddy X55. Thanks once again to the team at Mechdiy for sending me this device to review. Please go ahead and check out their website, mechdiy.com. You can also find a link in the description box below if you fancy picking up an X55, an RK2023, a Miyoo Mini Plus, or any of their other devices. I've had really great experiences with them so far, and they do come with my recommendation. Note that the link that I put in the description will be an affiliate link, so if you do use it to buy anything, I will get a small kickback, but that's at no cost to you. What do you think about the PowKiddy X55 so far? Do let me know in the comment box below, and if you like this video, please leave a like on it. Please also subscribe to my channel for further X55 videos, and of course my long-awaited RK2023 review, which is coming up very soon. Thanks very much for watching Retro Breeze, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.